Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Conversations That Matter with your host. It's me, Alex Newman, for the New American Magazine. We have a very special guest with you today, just like we have every time we do this show. His name is Mitchell Gerber. He's an investigative journalist. He's done a lot of work on China, and actually right this moment, he is on the border with China. He has been risking his life to expose some of the atrocities perpetrated by the Communist Party of China, in particular, the persecution of the Falun Gong movement and also the absolutely grotesque organ harvesting. Mitchell, thank you so much for joining us. And tell us real quick, what's the CCP up to? What have you been working on that they've been doing?
Wow, thank you, Alex. Well, for the 22 years of my life, close to the Chinese border as we speak, traveling the world, I have been exposing and investigating the forced live organ harvesting of a spiritual movement, a beautiful spiritual movement that became the largest spiritual movement in China, called Falun Gong, also known as Falun Dafa, that has been targeted for eradication by the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese military. They have been sent hundreds and thousands of these spiritual practitioners of this mind and body ancient spiritual movement, namely Falun Gong or Falun Dafa, to state-mandated hospitals. Their organs then cut out of their bodies while alive, while the blood is still flowing, Alex. And then their organs removed and sold as the healthiest organs in the world to fuel a multi-billion-dollar state-sanctioned, on-demand genocide, basically. No other regime on the face of the earth has done this. So I've been investigating this and exposing this with the other investigators on the scene for the last probably about 22 years now.
Wow. Yeah. We've done some work on this in the New American. Actually, I went to Israel some years ago where the deputy speaker of the Knesset was having a big conference on this, and they actually brought in some people from China who were familiar with this. Let's start with some basics. First of all, what's the purpose of the organ harvesting? Is this just a money-making machine, or is it just part of intimidating the Falun Gong? Why the organ harvesting? Why the barbarism?
Well, that's a great question. To understand how this mass murdering regime is getting away with this kind of organ harvesting genocide is to understand that there is no limit, Alex, to how far the Chinese Communist Party will go to wipe out something or someone. So when the Falun Gong became the largest spiritual movement in China, 1 out of every 12 Chinese national citizens were practicing these slow-moving exercises with a philosophy of being truthful, compassionate, and tolerant. So the mindset was just amplifying and the body was following it in health. And the communist regime did an investigative medical research procedure in sharing the results of this health efficacy to the CCP's president or ministry of dictatorship, Jiang Zemin, in the early 1990s, who hated that he couldn't control the amount of people practicing this, outnumbering the number of people in the Chinese Communist Party membership by 30 million people. So not only did he despise Falun Gongs because of its outrageous popularity in China, but he wanted to kill them for their organs and make a massive amounts of money off this and fueling a multi-billion-dollar business off these organs.
Wow. And so, the Communist Party of China has claimed a few times that this is a conspiracy theory, that it's anti-China propaganda, that it's racist people complaining because they don't like Chinese people. But that's not the case. You've got evidence showing that this is really happening.
52 pieces of evidence. I actually had brought a coalition to the British Parliament and a child trafficking court in London about 2 years ago with David Kilgour, who just passed, unfortunately, from a liver disease or a lung disease. David Kilgour, David Mattis, and Ethan Gutman, as well as Dr. Enver Tohti. And they have been on the scene and on the case with their books, with their evidence, for at least 20 years now, exposing this. It's been, all the world governments know about this. And we actually have counterintelligence agents that have come out, doctors like Dr. Enver Tohti, who did forced organ harvesting on live prisoners of conscience. So there's absolutely no doubt that this is going on. And I have a couple of clips to play for you soon enough for your audience. But the websites, the coalition to investigate this, it's all there, black and white, irrefutable beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah. David Kilgour, for those who don't know, he was the Assistant Secretary of State for the Canadian government for the Asia Pacific region, and probably one of the most outspoken individuals in the world on this, gathered all kinds of evidence along with some others. And we actually interviewed him several times for the New American here. He's one of the first people that I talked to about this, and highly credible individual. Mitchell, let's go ahead and roll some of those clips real quick before we go to break. So let's roll the first. Do you want to tell us what we're going to see, and then we'll go into this?
Absolutely. Well, for the skeptics out there, this is from the Human Rights Council. This is Habib Sadid from the China Tribunal with Jeffrey Nice-QC, who was the former prosecuting attorney for Slobodan Milosevic. They unanimously came together, called the China Tribunal at chinatribunal.com, to expose this. So here's the first clip for the skeptics out there that this is irrefutable and this is taking place.
Mr. Vice President, the Durban Declaration affirms the urgent need to prevent, combat, and eliminate all forms of trafficking in persons, including organ trafficking. China Tribunal, a people's tribunal chaired by Sir Jeffrey Nice, considered all available evidence and concluded that forced organ harvesting from prisoners of conscience, including the religious and ethnic minorities of Falun Gong and Uyghurs, had been committed for years throughout China on a significant scale, and that it continues today. This involves hundreds of thousands of victims. Acting on independent legal advice, the tribunal concluded that commission of crimes against humanity against Falun Gong and Uyghurs had been proved beyond reasonable doubt, victim for victim, and death for death. Cutting out the hearts and other organs from living, blameless, harmless, peaceable people constitutes one of the worst mass atrocities of this century. Organ transplantation to save life is a scientific and social triumph, but killing the donor is criminal. Government and international bodies must do their duty not only in regard to the possible charge of genocide, but also in regard to crimes against humanity, which the tribunal does not consider to be less heinous. It is the legal obligation of UN member states and the duty of this Council to address this criminal conduct. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
All right, wow, that was powerful. Now you have one more clip you wanted to show before we go to break. What are we about to see?
This is from an award-winning documentary, Alex, 18 award-winning documentary called Hard to Believe, talking about that this is going on. And actually, at the end of it, shows a doctor that has been investigated. All the investigators, about 17 different phone calls, were targeting the presidents, the directors, and the doctors committing this forced organ harvesting. So take a look at this.
By 2000, Falun Gong practitioners were disappearing into labor camps in mass numbers. At the same time, Chinese hospitals began promoting their organ transplant expertise.
I'm David Matus, and with me is David Kilgore. We've been asked to investigate allegations that there has been harvesting of organs of Falun Gong in China. David Kilgore is a former member of parliament and former cabinet minister for Asia Pacific, and I'm a Winnipeg lawyer doing immigration, refugee, and international human rights law in Winnipeg. And we have now done our investigation, and we're producing this report. And I didn't know whether it was true or not, and so my task initially was to try to figure out a way of approaching the issue so that I could either prove it or disprove it and not just walk away and say, I don't know.
The number of executions in China varied widely depending on who was counting. But Matus says no matter which number he used, the number of executions and the number of organs didn't add up.
The transplant volumes increased substantially after the persecution of Falun Gong began. And I mean, there's a lot of other evidence, but the most likely explanation for the increase is the Falun Gong. We pursued every investigative trail we could find. In the report, you will see that there are 18 different avenues of proof and disproof we considered and evaluated. Our bottom line conclusion, after considering everything as best we could, was that the allegations are true. We believe them to be true, that this harvesting is indeed happening.
Matus says what made Falun Gong organs especially attractive was the practitioners' healthy lifestyle. They do not drink or smoke. On many of the recordings of phone calls made to more than 100 Chinese hospitals, doctors assure callers that transplant organs are from healthy Falun Gong practitioners.
都是那种健康的法轮功是吧？健康的法轮功。对，肯定是学得好的才能做完，因为这种东西做了要保证质量的。那是都要像你们都要做监狱去自己去挑选是吧？对，肯定。
All right, folks, powerful stuff. We'll be right back on the other side of this break. Stay with us. This is Conversations That Matter. We saw some really powerful stuff in the last segment, Mitchell. What should people be doing about this? I mean, there's not really a lot of ways for people to influence the Communist Party of China, but as just decent human beings, it's hard to know that this is happening. What can people do to try to stop this atrocity that's going on?
The most important thing, I believe, Alex, is discernment. The pen is always more mighty than the sword, as well as wisdom and knowledge. So I would truly implore people to learn about Falun Gong. It's a beautiful spiritual movement. Those who are into the yoga, health and wellness realms, even the fitness realm, would absolutely get a kick out of learning about this, especially because we're in all these lockdowns and this COVID crisis. People are stressed out, uncertain, and Falun Gong offers an incredible way of relieving the stress, the anxiety, and raising those levels of vitality and mindset to proliferate positivity and prosperity. So I would suggest going to the website faluninfo.net to learn about Falun Gong, as well as all the skeptics out there again, endtransplantabuse.org. But like I said, Alex, and like you said, we can go to a war with China. We don't want a nuclear holocaust in our hands, but for people to be discerning, aware, and assertive in basically calling their congressmen, sharing this with their colleagues, their business people, as well as their classes, if you're professors, share the websites and the knowledge, because people should voice their support in exposing the CCP and coming to the aid of those like the Falun Gong who are being brutally persecuted under this mass murdering regime.
Yeah, it is pretty incredible. You have two more clips that you want to show. Let's do those so we don't run out of time, and then we'll wrap up. But tell us what we're about to see, Mitchell.
Absolutely. This is from an award-winning documentary, Hard to Believe as well, the second clip. And the documentary is free of charge on YouTube. This is also sharing about what is actually going on, and the testimony from the doctor, surgeon turned bus driver from China, who actually did a forced organ harvesting on a prisoner of conscience and then fled to London to tell about it.
One of the worst crimes in history began taking place in hospitals throughout the country as organ transplants suddenly began to skyrocket.
We've been asked to investigate allegations that there has been harvesting of organs of Falun Gong in China. Our bottom line conclusion, after considering everything as best we could, was that the allegations are true.
I began conducting comprehensive interviews with medical professionals, Chinese law enforcement personnel, and over 50 refugees from the Laogai system. But I estimate that 65,000 Falun Gong were murdered for their organs from 2000 to 2008.
Essentially what organ harvesting means is they're taking Falun Gong practitioners literally like cattle, holding them in prison camps, testing their blood and other vital organs, and when someone comes into the country that needs a heart, a liver, a kidney, they find a match, they take the Falun Gong practitioner, extract their organs, of course killing them in the process.
People who are expecting this to sort of just be solved naturally by all we have to do is sit back and they'll fix it, this is wrong. The West has to take a role. And the one role the West can do is say, these are our values. We cannot go beyond this. There are certain lines we can't cross. This is a red line. That's an absolute red line.
Enver Tohti, the surgeon turned bus driver, says it's been 20 years since he removed the organs from that live prisoner. It remains a mystery why so few people have ever heard about the thing he says he cannot forget.
This is my experience. This is a real, true story. If you keep silent, this tragedy will continue. And people, they just don't want to touch this evil. Because if you touch this evil, maybe at the end of the day, you may not be able to tackle this the consequences. That is my guess.
Wow, that's some powerful stuff, Mitchell. And you have one more clip that you wanted to show us. I mean, this is just heartbreaking stuff, but walk us through what we're about to see.
Absolutely. Well, before our offices got shut down where I am, we did a clip. Forgive me, there's two words that were a little bit typoed because I was working with Vietnamese and Chinese people. But It's called The Genocide of a Lifetime. And the clip actually shows that this is not a cult, this is not a terrorist group, this has been demonized and brutally persecuted, and Falun Gong has actually stood the test of time in their decades of courage to expose evil, stand up righteously and peacefully against this mass murdering regime. And I think this will definitely shed a great limelight on this atrocity that is occurring.
There are no human rights in China, and the most outrageous example of no human rights in China is killing a peaceful community of Falun Gong practitioners and Uyghurs, who are Muslims, and Tibetan Buddhists, and Christians, house Christians, for their organs, kidneys, livers, and so on, and then selling the organs to wealthy Chinese or foreigners, and the people are killed in the process.
The belief that I have, I share with David Kilgore, that organ harvesting is widespread in China, and it is restricted almost exclusively to Falun Gong practitioners. The Falun Gong are to the Chinese regime of today what the Jews were to the Nazis during the war. And we should all take note of this and look at China with new eyes.
There's no evidence that Falun Gong is a cult of any sort. There's no evidence of political action to try and bring down the Chinese government. There's no evidence of anything other than a deep desire to be left alone to practice their spiritual beliefs in peace and to not be locked up and murdered.
David and I have met Falun Gong practitioners in probably 50 countries.
Or even more, maybe.
Okay, all walks of life, all ages, all backgrounds, all education. I've found them to be a wonderful group of people.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't disagree with any of that. I mean, Falun Gong, first of all, it's not even an organization because it's a set of exercises with a spiritual foundation. Yeah. Everything's on the internet. You don't pay anything. You don't sign up to anything. You can start whenever you want. You can stop whenever you want. You don't even have to tell anybody you're doing it. Their principles are very simple and ethical. And I mean, all of that is true.
Wow. All right. Well, thank you for bringing those, Mitchell. We've only got a few minutes left, and I want to ask you, if this regime is willing to take its own citizens and chop their organs out while they're still alive, how big of a threat is it to the world? We hear a lot of Western elites saying that, oh, we can live with China. They're going to be part of the new world order. They're going to participate in the rules-based world order. We had Xi Jinping, one of the keynote speakers at the World Economic Forum. It seems like Western elites are really, really cozy with this regime that of course, is harvesting organs from political prisoners and religious dissidents. How big of a threat is this government to the world and to freedom?
It is a specter that is ruling our world. And if people really wanted to divulge deeply in how big of a threat, I highly recommend the Epoch Times out of New York City and their publication on the communist specter is ruling our world. It is the biggest threat, backed by the Rothschilds, the World Economic Forum, and all these globalist cabal that want to destroy humanity. It's the devil bent on destroying humanity, and it's the perfect specter and system for these diabolical maniacs who want to destroy the world.
But why are Western elites on board with it? And as far as I'm concerned, it's not a question of if they are. It's very clear that they are. The Rockefellers, I mean, all even the Biden administration, for crying out loud, they all seem to be in bed with this regime. What's the attraction? Are they being paid? Are they ideological cousins? Why would Western elites sell out their countries to this?
Human extinction, Alex, before a loss of profit. And Peter Brennan, who is one of the fathers of psychiatry, has written a book about We Are the Prey. All these predator elites are in bed with the CCP. They love the system. They know it is the system that can go through the radar, infiltrate into the Western countries and dismantle the traditional values. But they're not going to get away with murder because of people like you and people like me. So again, I appreciate coming on your show, Alex, and sharing this about Falun Gong, voice the support and expose the truth for what it is.
Well, I appreciate you coming on very much, Mitchell, and thank you for the work that you're doing. Before we let you go, what's the best way for people to follow your work and to get in touch? Are you on social media? How can people get in touch with you?
Twitter, TruthSeeker007. That's on my Twitter. That's all I have. I'm banned from every other platform. That's all I have. But I would encourage people to learn about Falun Gong as well. There's a website called www.learnfalungong.org. and it's free of charge. It's beautiful, and you'll learn a lot by why the Chinese government are killing these people for their organs, because it's so healthy and beautiful. But again, Alex, I appreciate it, and God bless you, man. You're doing great work as well. I love your show.
Thank you so much, Mitchell. We appreciate you coming on. God bless you as well. Thanks for all the great work. All right, folks, that was Mitchell Gerber, investigative journalist right on the border with China, risking his life to expose these atrocities. So thanks for tuning in, folks. Really appreciate you. I'm Alex Newman. This is Conversations That Matter for the New American Magazine. Please share this out and go to thenewamerican.com, sign up. Thanks again. Until next time, God bless you all.